Hello and welcome to History Roundtable. My name is Andrea Defusco-Sullivan. I am a professor of writing at the American College of History and Legal Studies in Salem, New Hampshire, and I have the pleasure of being joined today by two members of the ACHLS community. First of all, I'd like to welcome Dean Lawrence Velvel, the Dean of the Massachusetts School of Law at Andover, and founding Dean and founding Professor Michael Chesson of the American College of History and Legal Studies. Welcome, gentlemen. Dean Velvel, if I may start with you. For the members of our audience who may know just a bit, or may be starting to know about the American College of History and Legal Studies, what makes ACHLS unique?
It's one of only two schools in the country which is a senior college, that is to say offers the junior and senior years but not the freshman and sophomore years. Secondly, it focuses entirely on history. Thirdly, because we do focus on history and because we teach strictly by the discussion method without lecturing, this is a very different method than is used virtually anywhere in the country except in law schools, and even law schools are not using the discussion method so much anymore, at least not as much as they used to. So all of these things make ACHLS different, also because we have made a concerted effort, just as at MSL itself, to keep the tuition costs down. We are now offering, we've decided that, like some other schools have, we're going to offer in this coming year tuition-free education. There's some very famous schools that do that. And we thought that would be a good idea. So in this day when people are paying $20, $30, $40, and $50,000 for college educations, this makes ACHLS unique also. And I suppose I've forgotten a few other things, but that'll do for starters.
Thank you. As both of you gentlemen know, we have a great number of two-year community colleges in the Massachusetts and New Hampshire area, but nothing like, as you mentioned, a completion college like the American College of History and Legal Studies. Dr. Chesson, what's the advantage in 2011 of an ACHLS degree in history? What advantage could it give our students?
A degree in history gives every possible advantage. Aside from the strong possibility of early admission to the Massachusetts School of Law and saving a year of tuition and time, history and the scholarly monographs that I assign and that we all discuss around the table for 8 hours a week each semester give students a range of skills or strengthen skills they already possess in argumentation, critical thinking, the give and take of debate, expressing themselves clearly and cogently around the seminar table, and of course the presentations, the oral presentations, the papers that you set up in your writing course, which I've sat in on.
If we could return to ACHLS's history for a second, I'd like to ask Dean Velvel, just who started ACHLS and why? How was ACHLS created?
Well, I have to plead guilty. The law school had been in existence for about 18 or 19 years. It had a huge amount of experience and information about how to offer rigorous education inexpensively. And by that time, we had nearly 3,000 graduates. I thought that it would be desirable to bring these same techniques to bear in the undergraduate world, partly in the hope that if ACHLS was successful, it would be copied by many other schools, and not always in history, because there are many subjects in which you can do what ACHLS has done. And I thought that would be very, very important in this day and age when tuition is going through the roof and costs are going through the roof. So we hoped we'd be able to create a model that others could follow. And then, as I've said, we did think that we would offer a rigorous, inexpensive education and social mobility. It's always been very important to both the law school and then to ACHLS. Social mobility to people who are not, to say, in the upper middle class, maybe not even in the middle class, and not in the upper class. And we wanted very much to offer them the kind of rigorous education. And I can't stress how, I've sat in on the classes, and you couldn't ask for anything better at Harvard or Yale, if you ask me. And I went to one of these fancy pants law schools, so I know what the teaching is like at these kinds of schools, and the ACHLS teaching is better. So these were the fundamental reasons why ACHLS got started. In history, we picked partly because, I admit it, I'm an aficionado of history, yes. And also because you will not find a historian, in my judgment, who does not think accurately, again in my judgment, that one of the reasons this country is so constantly in so much difficulty is the absolute lack of knowledge of history. And it's also the case that the legal profession runs this country to an extent very disproportionate to its numbers. And so we set up this arrangement whereby people can go from the ACHLS to the law school, and that's partly in the hope that over the course of 30, 40, 50 years, people will be coming out of the law school who are well versed in history and therefore better versed to be leaders in the country.
Sure. Dr. Chesson, do you also bemoan what Dean Velvel spoke about as the perhaps dearth of knowledge of history with contemporary students?
I certainly do. They tend to be majoring in vocational subjects, pre-professional topics of one sort or another. And I think about the last two books assigned for the spring semester. Michael Schur's book, Imperial Hubris, about Afghanistan and bin Laden. He ran the bin Laden desk at the CIA for many years before he retired. And then the former dean of the Kennedy School at Harvard University, Joseph Nye, his book, The Paradox of American Power. Both of them talk about the absolute vital importance of an informed citizenry, that Americans need to read more, they need to read more widely and more deeply, and they need a better understanding of what's going on around them in their country and in the world.
Very true. And history really is the platform on which all of the humanities really stand. I know
it's the mother of the humanities.
Indeed it is. Certainly for literature, that is true. If I could impose on one of you gentlemen, Dr. Chesson, I'll stick with you for this. Could you describe the junior year curriculum for a student who, let's say, would be entering ACHLS in the fall?
All students must take American History 1 and 2 over the course of 2 semesters. That's 8 hours per week, 8 credits of history each semester. And in the fall, we begin with the early colonial era, the first English settlements in North America, some of their imperial rivals from the Netherlands, Spain, France, and we take it up to the Civil War, and then resume with the Civil War through Reconstruction up to the recent past in the spring. In addition to that 8-credit history course, it's linked to your 4-credit writing course. So that's 12 credits per semester, but only 2 courses. Right. And it's history and writing intensive, the curriculum.
It is. And that, I think, the interplay of those 2 courses works very well. Dean Velvel?
I've sat in on Mike's classes, and there is no question in my mind. There hasn't been any question in my mind since about the 8th week that the experience of being in these classes has caused the students in them to become different people. Indeed. They read much better, they speak much better, they're far more thoughtful, they're far more attuned to the fact that there are pros and cons. This is a wonderful education for any business or profession that they may choose to go into. So I think that Mike Chesson has done a wonderful job in this regard.
Well, if I may continue with you, Dean Velvel.
Thank you, Larry.
It's true.
You can pay me later.
For the folks in our viewing audience who might not be familiar with the Harkness Method that's employed at schools like Exeter and a lot of the elite prep schools, could you describe what the Harkness table is like and how it might be different from a lot of other college classrooms?
Well, the Harkness Method and discussion teaching, sometimes called Socratic teaching in law schools, are very much the same thing. Rather than a professor lecturing, a professor will ask a question and the students will address the question. They will argue with each other. Right. They will suggest new questions. And the students learn from each other. It forces them to read much more closely. It forces them to understand that, as at the West Point, where the motto used to be every man in every class every day, now it's every man and woman, they will be called upon continuously, so they have to prepare. And fundamentally, you know, in one sentence, no lectures, all discussion.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. Did you find, Dr. Chesson, that sometimes this discussion method caused students who may have had differing political viewpoints to take it up with one another a bit? Was this a good thing or a bad thing?
They certainly did, and it was a very good thing. And there was a running argument throughout most of the year about the correct definition of the American middle class.
Oh.
And one student, Democrat, aide to a Democratic congressman from Massachusetts. Another student, although a native of Massachusetts, lives now in New Hampshire. Both of them in their 40s, both of them married with children, and quite divergent political views. And almost every night at the break, they'd go across the street to Dunkin' Donuts together for coffee.
Yes, it's true. This would probably be a good moment to tell our audience what the student body, ACHLS, is like. Say I am a 60-year-old who wants to complete a degree, or a 21-year-old who wants to finish up a bachelor's that I discontinued a year or so ago. Would I feel welcome at ACHLS?
Absolutely. The age range in our first year was students in their 40s and students in their 20s, fresh out of community college. The older ones had never finished a BA. In one case, had dropped out of a college. Now looking to finish that BA, and both of them very eager to go to law school. But the mix of ages, I might say generations, a 20-year gap, among the students gave another kind of edge or flavoring to the class discussions.
Indeed. Because
some of them are more experienced, been out there in the world of work longer, have family responsibilities and commitments, and the 20-year-olds had none of that, but they had a lot of energy and a lot of curiosity.
Yep, very true.
We have found to be true in the entire 23-year history of the law school. Law school has always had people ranging from, say, 24 or 25 to people in their late 50s and 60s. Lots of people in their 50s, even more in their 40s. And they each learn from each other. They're different generations. They're learning from each other, and they're friends. That's one of the remarkable things about it. There is no generation gap at the law school, even though we've had, you know, every year we have hundreds of people from across the age range. So that's what's happening here at ACHLS is replicating what has happened in a law school for over 20 years.
Yes. It's very true. That's very true. When we speak about student diversity, the piece of the puzzle that's often left out is including non-traditionally aged students. I think that's quite accurate. Very good. I know, Dean Velvel, you've spoken to this earlier, but if you could, say I'm a young man fresh out of community college, and I'm listening to both of you gentlemen talk about the advantages of ACHLS. Convince me, a young man or a young woman, or an older man or older woman, why a history degree is still so valuable in 2011.
There's a societal standpoint, and there's the individual standpoint. Sure. And I've more or less touched on both of them.
You have.
From the individual standpoint, the way we teach history at ACHLS, you will, as Mike said, learn how to think, argue, write, speak, engage in cross-discussion, speak extemporaneously. You will learn all the intellectual traits that business is looking for. And of course, from ACHLS, you can go to law school, you can go to other professional schools, you can go out into business. Business, you know, I read continuously, they're not so interested in people with degrees in business. They're interested in people who can think, write, speak, et cetera, plan, et cetera, et cetera. So that's from the individual standpoint. From the societal standpoint, as I've said, and as I think virtually every historian agrees, this country gets into lots and lots of trouble because it does not know nor care about its own history. And I hope that over the course of time, and particularly because lawyers are so disproportionately the leaders of the country, I'm not saying that's good, but I am saying it's the fact.
Yeah, yes.
Perhaps this will have a beneficial effect on the life of the country in the future.
Absolutely, absolutely. You both participated in a very successful, I was here, and I know it was very successful because there literally was not room in this room for me. Civil War seminar this past spring. Okay. This is the 150th anniversary of the Civil War. So certainly the topics that are discussed in your seminars, Dr. Chesson, are valuable today. Speak for a minute, because I will be talking about the open house that this college will be hosting this summer, but speak for a minute about the experience of that Civil War seminar. As I said, it was a Saturday morning, a full Saturday morning, a half day really, and the attendance I thought was remarkable. It exceeded all of my expectations. Were you as equally gratified by that seminar?
I was, though not entirely surprised. I speak various parts of the country to Civil War roundtables and other Civil War groups. Last week I was down in coastal Georgia talking to a Civil War roundtable, and I know there is a deep and abiding and passionate interest in our Civil War among Americans of all ages and backgrounds, and we saw that reflected here at the Civil War Forum. I think it was April 2nd. And there was a range of individuals here, some children, teenagers.
Yes, indeed.
Young prospective students, their parents, some retired residents in New Hampshire and Massachusetts, all walks of life. And they sat here riveted for 3 hours. And it certainly wasn't because I was lecturing to them or presenting my own point of view. What instead I was trying to do was to throw out some big questions about the war, causes and motivations, why it was fought the way it was, why one side lost and the other won, and whether that war is still relevant to us today, and if so, how and why, and what's its legacy. What should we tell our children and our grandchildren and our neighbors about the war?
Mike did a wonderful job.
I agree.
Did a wonderful job. You know, one of the cruder aspects in regard to this topic is the fact that it is a point that's relevant to us today. It's been relevant to us at least since the time of Korea. Grant knew that for America, for the Union to win, it had to be an all-out maximum effort all the time. Eisenhower followed that philosophy in northeastern Europe after D-Day. He had been urged by Montgomery and by Patton to have certain breakouts, which would not be this massive push philosophy. Today we're fighting in at least 3 different countries, and in none of them are we following the philosophy that Grant established for the United States, that Eisenhower took up in Europe. And you know, there's this idea that, well, we're not good at brush fire or guerrilla wars. We haven't the taste for it, the talent for it, and Americans don't want to see their kids bleed away in, you know, in small batches, but continuously. Well, they're the most important military aspect of the Civil War is something that's still with us today and that people are still arguing about.
I never paused to think about that before. That's absolutely true. And from a layman's perspective, coming not from the perspective of history by vocation or avocation, though certainly I'm getting there thanks to you, Dr. Chesson, the cyclical nature of history is something that the students note. And I think it was edifying to see during that Civil War seminar both the 80-year-olds in your audience and the 8-year-olds enraptured for a good 4 hours. Didn't move, didn't leave during the break. And it is, I think that history captures the American imagination in ways that you very eloquently stated, Dean Velvel, but I think that's true for sure.
You could feel the emotions and the passion in the room. And I sensed it among my students. We were discussing a book about a month ago, The Best War Ever. The title is deliberately sarcastic and bitterly ironic, and it's by Michael C.C. Adams, a very fine military and social historian. And he argues in his book on World War II that we won that war only with massive applications of force against Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan. The same point that Dean Velvel just made.
Yes, that's true. Wasn't the United States loath to get involved in that war? The urban legend that I heard was that we were more or less pushed into it by the bombing in Pearl Harbor.
Well, yeah, it's a long, long story about Roosevelt trying to lead where the country didn't want to go, and finally, and taking steps. I think it's fair, Mike can comment on this. I think it's fair to say taking steps against Japan, cutting off their oil, that we're bound to lead to a war in the Pacific. But, you know, bottom line, America did not want to fight, but Pearl Harbor, like Fort Sumter, changed everything. The country, when Fort Sumter was attacked, the North, the views in the North flipped 180% almost overnight. Yeah. Same thing happened with Pearl Harbor. Would you say that's accurate, Mike?
Those two events, along with 9/11, are often compared.
Yes.
Stephen Douglas, after the firing of Fort Sumter, leading Democratic politician, dependent on Southern votes for the nomination that he got in 1860. The day after the firing of Fort Sumter, he spoke in Chicago and he said, now there are only two kinds of people in this country, Americans and traitors.
Wow. Wow. You know, I imagine that there are people in our audience who, like me, had a secondary and a primary education that was very well soaked in social studies, but not so much in the history of our own nation. And I bet that there are people who want to learn more about this college, certainly want to learn more about the free tuition that you mentioned via the generosity of you and our Board of Trustees. How can a student that's watching us today, a prospective student, the aunt, the uncle, the brother, the co-worker of a prospective student, learn more about us?
Well, they can go to our website at www.achls.org. There are frequently asked questions there. There's an introduction to our faculty and staff. There's an academic calendar. There's a detailed and full listing of the curriculum, including the advanced courses taught in the senior year in 4 different specialized areas. There's a range of information available on that website. And again, to repeat, the Board of Trustees very generously decided at their last meeting to offer free tuition for students applying for the fall term for all year.
I'm still glad I'm sitting down whenever I hear that. That's such a boon in these economic times. It's a windfall, really, for these students.
2 famous colleges that we are following. One is Berea in the Appalachians, which for, I don't know, what, 100 years has offered free tuition. And in fact, as I understand it, if your family income is over $50,000 a year, you're not permitted to go there. And the other is Cooper Union in New York City, which has been doing that since, I think, 1858 or 1859. And these are both very famous schools, And we thought, well, we could do worse than to follow Berea and Cooper Union.
Indeed we could.
Yeah.
Indeed we could. Good company in that
Yeah.
case. Since we are a completion college, our students come to us, apply to ACHLS with 60 or more credits. What else are we looking for in a prospective applicant?
A 2.7 grade point average, 3 letters of recommendation, all transcripts, whether from a community college or a 4-year school, or every academic institution you've attended at the college or university level, a personal statement, and you have to come in to the American College at 1 Stiles Road, Salem, New Hampshire, schedule the interview beforehand, schedule an appointment, but an interview with one of our staff and an essay question that you must answer. It's untimed. It's on a topic of current interest. This past year, it's been about the immigration controversy, the debate over illegal immigrants, over how to deal with the problem, and we expect answers that are written not just from the left or the right point of view, but that take in divergent opinions, different arguments, different types of evidence, all expressed in a clean, well-organized, well-thought-out essay.
And if I'm not mistaken, Dean Velvel, the lack of reliance on a standardized test, but instead the essay question, the written essay question, is the model that was inaugurated at the Massachusetts School of Law, wasn't it?
That is correct. We've never used the LSAT, and from the day we opened, we have given people an untimed essay test, which we create. And most lately, by the way, on an analogous subject, while we have always demanded that every single person admitted to the school have an interview, recently, when people have lived 1,500 and 2,000 miles away, we have let them do the interview by Skype. Is the college going to do that, Michael?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, why not? If we can take advantage of that,
and understand that before we did that, and even now, people have come 2,000 miles for the interview because they want to get into the school.
I believe we have a young lady from the West Coast. The obvious pleasure of our company. What other boon would the students have by attending our June 29th open house right here at the college, 1 Stiles Road, Salem, New Hampshire? It's a Wednesday evening, June 29th. What else can students who attend our open house do or participate in or learn, just as our end note today?
They will have a chance to audit the summer school courses that are being taught. One of them, American Constitutional History, by Professor Peter Malaguti, who teaches at the Massachusetts School of Law. And the other, American Economic History, taught by Professor Dave Fagerstrom. It's economic history and the history of economic regulation, the government's involvement with the economy, the many economic factors behind our history. So 2 demanding summer school courses, but the cost of those summer school courses is included in a year's tuition.
It is. If students want to meet the deans of our colleges, our ACHLS and its Creating College, MSL, our faculty, and our current students, please do come to our June 29th open house, or really visit us anytime. Visit our website. We would indeed. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for your time today.
Thank you, Andrea.
It's a pleasure.